That second lasted an eternity. Not all his life flashed before his eyes, but his mistakes certainly did.
Darren Leslie Marner, I hereby sentence you.
Daz, we lost the baby. Darren, I'm sorry, mate, it's been an accident. They jolted through him as if he were being electrocuted over and over. His life hadn't been a happy one, hadn't even been an adequate one, but he would do anything to go back to it rather than live out what was to come next. The rat's nose twitched, and a single droplet of blood rolled down one of its whiskers and onto his t-shirt. It opened its mouth a little, revealing red stained incisors. This malevolent, vile thing had already tasted his flesh, that was obvious, but that had merely been an hors d'oeuvre. It was just inches away from his face as the rest of the creatures continued to scale him and rip at his body. He knew it was going to pounce any second, to tear at his face, his cheeks, his eyes. There was nothing left in his bladder, but if there had been, he would surely have lost control of it once again. Suddenly he felt something on his other shoulder too. Instinctively he turned, but as he did, both rats pounced. Claws and teeth ripped at his skin like rusted Stanley blades. He screamed. For the briefest moment, he looked down to see his body was not his own any longer. It was just a mass of moving, jostling brown and red furry bodies. His lifeblood was literally flowing out before his eyes. He brought his hands up to pull the two gnashing, tearing things from his cheeks, but they weren't his arms anymore. He was wearing a living, breathing bodysuit of vileness. Teeth carved at him, and just then, like some massive elastic band twanging loudly, the Achilles tendon in his right foot snapped. He collapsed like a falling tree and became immersed in the squalling sea of movement. He felt another tile move beneath him. There were always several levers to make sure the trap would be sprung, but it didn't matter. All the damage had been done now. Darren closed his eyes tightly as tears continued to fall, as more teeth tore at his nose, his chin, his lips. The hurt was immeasurable, indescribable. More hungry mouths clamped around his thighs, his underbelly, his genitalia, and his entire body began to convulse wildly. His brain told him this wasn't real. This was just part of some horrific nightmare, and to wake himself up, he flicked his eyes open. But there was nothing to see but blackness. Then slowly, very slowly, the pain began to fade a little at a time. Even the warm bodies and the blood coating him from head to foot couldn't help as the rigid hand of death closed around him. He'd had dreams of starting a new life, moving to Spain or somewhere on the Med, but he realised he was going somewhere much hotter for all the bad he had done in his life. Finally, his body gave up the fight and fell still despite remaining conscious for another minute. He still felt the nipping, scratching claws. He still heard the squeals and squeaks as the excited feeding frenzy continued. But now he was just a spectator to his own death, and all he had to accompany him on that journey to whatever lay beyond were his regrets.